Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And I'll just give you a little forewarning. As you can tell, as you've seen a few of these episodes, you can kind of tell how the format works. This is basically raw footage of me off the cuff with some vague preparations beforehand on what I want to talk about the particular film in question. My warning is that I anticipate this to be a very long episode. I don't know how long it's going to end up being, but there's going to be a lot that's going to be covered, and I think in the end it's going to be. I like it to be very substantive, but it's probably going to come off as a little bit of a gushing because we are going to be talking about one of my favorite films. Without further ado, we go into Spine 34, Andrei Rublev, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky, 1966, and other release years. Already you can tell this is going to be a long one. Alright, I want to get the big thing out of the way first, which is why I call this one of my favorite films. For starters, I think of cinema... There shouldn't be a single film that can be called the greatest film of all time, because cinema is, while it can do a lot, it's still very limited. There's only so much one film can do without it feeling very cluttered and very overripe. I think film works best when it does when it picks what it sets out to be and then just does those elements really well. I mean, you don't expect Citizen Kane to have a great straightforward narrative. Its strength is that it deals more with psychology and the way different people perceive others. In fact, for a film that centers on the title character, you never really get to see the title character on his own, except in the very beginning. Everything else about him is learned and understood through filters. You see it in the newsreel, you see it in Thatcher's memoirs, you see it in Bernstein's recollections, you see it in... Jedediah's recollections and Susan Alexander's recollections, and the butler, who knows where all the bodies are buried. But it works. It doesn't do Citizen Kane doesn't do everything, but it does a few things really, really well. And in that sense, I feel that cinema should exist in pantheons where you have a group of films that do things really well, and in there you get in general you get the breadth of what cinema can do, and for you personally, it showcases where your interest lies. Because let's face it, we all have different moods. There are days where we just are not in the mood for something heavy and serious. Sometimes we want something a little bit more fun, or we look for characters over narrative or narrative over characters. And so it's good to have a selection of films. So this is why I call Andrei Rublev one of my favorite films, not the favorite. And again, you've probably heard this too, well, my favorite films keep shifting all the time. Well, instead of just doing the rack and stack, let's just put them all in the same room. Same thing with directors as well. Not just a single director, but there should be a pantheon. So Andrei Rublev is one of my favorite films. And here's why. It's because Andrei Rublev asks meaningful questions for me. And it covers two big things. One is the nature of art, and the other is religion and or spirituality. What I see in Andrei Rublev... Well, first off, like The Seventh Seal, Andrei Rublev is not really a historical film. It's certainly set in historical events, and a lot of it can be traced back. There was of course an actual iconographer named Andrei Rublev. We know some we know some key moments in his life. We don't know everything. So to call this a biopic of Andrei Rublev is missing the point. It's also not so much a historical record, although there were efforts taken to understand the history of his time. But I think that this film has bigger and deeper and more profound aims. And what it does is it explores the nature of art, the nature of the artist, and also particularly the nature of an artist with faith. So these are big things, and this is why I'm going to get all gushy, because these are things that are actually very important to me as an artist, both in the worlds of music and in the worlds of film. And one of the big things I get from Andrei Rublev is that I feel that art at its best is when it provides some kind of transcendence for the viewer, observer, listener. In other words, to take you above and beyond your present moment. You know, everything you're feeling right now, everything you're experiencing right now, where you are at this particular point in time and space. Does it take you to a place beyond where you are and shows you something bigger and grander and greater? That's why I feel that art at its best. And for the artists, the constant question, or I should say the constant struggle, the drama, if you will, is, can you make something that provides transcendence and speaks to important, worthwhile, lasting values, like virtue, in a world that feels utterly devoid of those things? And this is what you see throughout Andrei Rublev. The way Andrei Rublev is structured, and I'll get into lengths, but and versions and all that, but the way it's generally structured is it's composed of little episodes. There are about 7 or so of these, and there's also a prologue. There's a prologue in the beginning, and then there's an epilogue. So once again, these videos are assuming that you've seen the films before. I'll try to keep spoilers to a minimum, or at least very mild, but if you want to be absolutely safe, and if you want to see this, go see the film, and then you can come back. But this is assuming that you've seen the film, or you're just interested in general, or you don't mind spoilers. So here you go. The prologue is, first off, the prologue shows someone inventing a hot air balloon, and this is supposed to be in the late 13th, early 14th century. Late 14th, early 15th century. And there's a successful launch, and actually in the midst of this, there's this crowd that comes in and tries to stop the project, but it goes through without a hitch. And it flies, and eventually it descends. That whole now you think, like, what's the whole point of that prologue? The prologue, I feel, establishes what the theme is, and which is about humans trying to transcend, trying to reach a greater height in a time when it's really, really nasty. So it has nothing directly to do with anything with Andrei Rublev. I feel it's more of a concept piece. And establishes the themes of what is going to be there. And I think one of the things you get from it is this notion about man trying to ascend and trying to reach for the heavens. In a way, it's kind of a medieval Russian, slightly playful take on the Icarus myth. So That's one way of thinking. But anyways, there's these little episodes that you see that all connect to Andrei Rublev. Like I said, he was an actual iconographer, and in Russia, and there you go. So the first episode you see is called The Gesture, and it also gives the time. It says summer 1400. And in there, it's Andrei with two fellow monks, Daniel and Kirill. They leave one monastery to go to another because they just received commission. And en route, they find a tavern in the countryside, and they decide to take shelter there because there's a pending storm. And while inside this tavern, there's this gesture that's playing. And he's giving this very bawdy story about a boyard, a Russian noble, having his beard taken off and then mistaken for a woman, and then all these little hijinks. It's a very, very bawdy and even not so much scandalous, but certainly antagonistic towards the powers that be. And what I like about that particular episode is that what in relation to art, you see that the gesture has a great skill. He's an entertainer. He can make the crowd laugh. There's a boisterous energy, and you really, really get into it. But it also doesn't last. Like, as soon as the monks go in, like everything, like all the good vibes that he created is just, it almost leaves the place. And in fact, the few people that are still giddy by all this and very likely still inebriated, they're remembering bits of the routines, but they're saying it very incorrectly. They're just so giddy with their little high. And that, to me, showcases the difference between what passes for art and true art. And this is not me being snobbish or anything, but if you really think about it, if you're really, really honest with yourself, what you find entertaining doesn't always last. And I think what makes something last is that when it goes beyond entertaining. I mean, let's face it, honestly, can you remember the last film that you saw? Chances are probably not. You probably have to really, really think about it. Unless you saw something that really, really stuck with you and really memorable. And I admit that sometimes it takes me a while to remember all the films that I've seen. And there's even been several meaningful films. But so the point is that it's not. I think what I certainly get from this episode. This is what's so great about the film, is that there are things that you do get out of it with each viewing. It's rewarding in its own way. But what I get from the gesture episode is that art is more than just pushing buttons, and that if you want to make something more meaningful, you can't just stop at just the button pushing. You have to go deeper. And the gesture, while he's certainly very talented and he's certainly very effective at what he does, there's not a whole lot of depth. And in fact, what ends up happening he does get captured by the boyars because of his little insults. And now what do you do? So that's the first episode. The next one covers a monk and a known iconographer of Rublev's time, Theophanes the Greek. And in that one, I said that it's episodic, but there are characters that continue through the episode. So I would say that this is more of a loose narrative rather than a strict narrative where you feel like every scene is tight and tells the story. It's you do get the sense of a direction. You do because it is based on someone's life, and there's also historical events that are surrounding what's going on, but it's not. It doesn't follow a strict narrative. So if you haven't seen this and you're still watching this, that may be something that you have to keep in mind. It does go on the lengthy side of things, and if you're not used to that, then it may be a little bit put off. But trust me on this. If you're patient with it and are looking at it from a thematic standpoint, that's when it becomes really, really rewarding. But anyway, so there's an episode with Theophanes the Greek, and one of the things that happens is that Kirill first sees him, and they have a pleasant conversation, and Kirill sets it up so that he wants to be Theophanes' assistant. He wants to work with him, but he wants him to send someone out to his monastery to call for him personally. And you find that Kirill is the prideful type. This is religion in the bad sense, and I'll get this out of the way too. Yes, I am practicing Orthodox. This is another reason why I love this film, is because it showcases that, not absolutely perfectly, but certainly there's a lot that you can get from this as an Orthodox Christian, as well as an artist. So right away, this already has a lot to like for it, certainly for me. But anyways, but Kirill has, he wants to, and he's particularly jealous of Andrei Rublev, because even then he's already praised in his lifetime for making icons. And so what Kirill wants is to have all this attention put on him, and so he gets this, and he goes back to the monastery, and a messenger does indeed arrive, and it is from Theophanes, and he calls for Andrei Rublev. And now, what's interesting in that episode, there's a little contrast that happens. Daniel is upset, and Andrei senses this, and there's a confession between them, and even a reconciliation between them, and you do get the sense that Andrei and Daniel have this, they're close to each other. They're monastic brethren. They're brothers in Christ, and so they want to reconcile any differences or animosities between them, making sure that there's no bad blood, and you really do feel that. And this is in contrast to Kirill, who decides to make a spectacle of himself by denouncing everybody in the monastery, including the head of the monastery, the abbot, and leaves, and eventually there's dog beating in there as well. So he's quite a nasty guy. But anyways, then while it's not given a title card, there's another episode where Andrei and Theophanes are talking, and they're specifically talking about the Passion, and also like what Christ's death means for salvation. So it gets into the theological realm a bit, and there's a nice visualization of the Passion as well, inspired by Bruegel paintings, one of Andrei Tarkovsky's favorite painters. And so there's that. Then the next episode is called The Feast, and this is supposedly, I forget the... And by the way, thank you to any and all who actually put on intelligent comments, and I'm sure the day will come that I will get a whole host of trolls, but thank you for keeping these on the dignified side. But at any rate, I do believe there is a Russian pagan equivalent to the Midsummer's Feast, which I know the Orthodox celebration that's close to that time is the beheading of... Well, no, I'm sorry. That's in the... No, the nativity of St. John the Baptist. Beheading comes much later, but the nativity of St. John the Baptist, or St. John the Forerunner. But anyways, that episode, there's this pagan feast going on, and Andrei Rublev is lured by this, and in so doing, he's also captured by the celebrating pagans, and in there it's the what is love argument. So there's that episode. And then the next episode is Andrei is working on the fresco icons inside the cathedral, the pending cathedral dedicated to the Last Judgment. And Andrei has a kind of artistic crisis where he doesn't feel really compelled to depict that subject, and he feels that why should this be made? You know, apart from that's what the prince wanted, that's what the Metropolitan wanted, and he's really, really concerned by this. And then the next one it's a really under your skin kind of moment, and it's the raid on Vladimir, and it's the Tartars in cahoots with the Grand Prince of Moscow's brother, and there's some issues there. Decide to raid in the city of Vladimir, and it's quite a tough affair to watch. There's obviously there's killings, there's fire, there's brutes, and yes, there are some animals that get it. I believe, like there's at one point where a horse falls down some stairs and breaks his legs. I think the horse was already due for a death. Like I think it was not. There have been things written about the animal cruelty side of it, and I forget exactly all the details that concern that, but there were some. It was quite a nest, but I think it's also been said that considering that this was supposed to be based on something that actually happened, you can imagine that the actual history would have been much worse, where they were actually cruel animals and they didn't care. I think every precaution was taken to make sure that it was done either safely, or if there was some brutality, that it was treated with a certain dignity. It wasn't done carelessly or recklessly. But it's also a very tough scene to watch, and there you see it's human beings at their cruelest, or being extremely cruel to each other. Which again, I think brings up the point is how can you make something, and particularly for icons. I mean, the icons for the Orthodox Church means a lot of things. It serves as a testimony to the faith. It's a testament to memory, and it's also a reminder of the spiritual dimensions. And so basically, how do you make art like that where basically we don't do any of those things to each other? In fact, we do the opposite. We do cruel and nasty things. How can you paint something that's going to point to things like love your enemies, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself, when we don't even do that in our own world, where we give in to petty jealousies, and we are cruel and merciless towards each other. We force a guy to swallow boiling pitch and drag him around by galloping horse through town. Cut someone's throat, raping them and attempting to rape. In fact, Andrei, in the previous episode, there's a mute/holy fool that appears, and Andrei kind of takes a liking to her, probably not so much romantically, but more platonically. And during the rage, there's someone is and actually was a fellow Russian, not a Tartar, was going to rape her, and Andrei saves her by killing him, and he takes this really, really hard, and that becomes the basis of his penance, which is covered in the next episode, where there's harsh winters and there's a famine, and it's a very, very low moment. And Andrei, in this time, he has taken a vow of silence because of what he had done. And so there's that episode. And then there's a very long episode which takes up about 45 minutes. And this is the kind of thing where, just based on the structure, you think, didn't anybody like edit this? Did anybody like, you know, streamline this together and so on? I mean, this one episode is the kind of thing where if you were to take all of this, and especially that one, to a professional screenwriter, they'll go, what is the point of this scene? What is this all about? And the episode that I'm talking about is the bell making episode. It seems to take a complete digression from anything related to Andrei Rublev, although he would be present in this episode. But it's mostly centered on this making of the bell, and it's a young man named Borishka who was the son of a bell maker, and he's approached by some emissaries from the Grand Prince, and they're looking for a bell maker, and he tells them that all the bell makers that are around, all the bell makers that you can find around here, they're all dead for various reasons. And so, but he feels empowered enough and sort of naive enough to say that I want to make this bell because my father told me the secret of bell making. And so with this kind of bold naivete, he then embarks on this project of making the bell. And he does, and in a way I personally empathize a lot with Borishka because he is young and he's sort of going at it full force with little to no experience. I mean, yes, he was the son of a bell maker, and which meant that he certainly had exposures to the process, but to go in and to make this claim and to do this bell, and he would do things that most people would go like, you know, there's easier ways of doing this, but he insists that no, this is my way of doing it. And I have a certain sympathy about this because I feel I'm closer to Borishka, where for me I'm bold, and especially if you know me personally, you know that I'm very bold in what I want to make and what I want to do, and I just go at it, and sometimes in a very bold, naive way. But I take it, and he does it, I think, out of some faith and of doing it, and I think he actually has a burning desire to do this. And sure enough, the bell does get made, and it actually rings. And there's a big to do about that, where if the bell that he makes doesn't ring, then he's going to be held responsible for it, and that's going to be his life. So a lot is riding on this bell. And you think that, okay, what's the point of a bell? What's I thought this was supposed to be by an iconographer. Why are we talking about? Again, this is why it relates to the larger theme about making art, about making things, and for a purpose and for a reason and for others. And this is related. And in fact, how it relates to the title character is that Andrei sees this and he sees that it's successful, and he actually breaks his silence at that point. And he tells them that, and in fact, what happens is that Borishka, this is where spoilers come in, Borishka says that no, he was never told the secret of bell making. But Andrei reminds him that what you've done for this village, what you've done for these people, they're very happy. It's a great feast. And he says, why don't we go together? Why don't we go out and you make bells and I make icons? Which then leads into the film's epilogue. The whole entire time it's shot in black and white. But then it switches to color. And it's these very, these extreme close-ups of details from the various icons that Rublev has painted. Either we know that he painted it, or it's attributed to him. By the way, slight side digression, for anyone who's Orthodox and watching this, I do not like the term writing icons. It is stupid. I mean, I understand the intent of saying that, and for those of you who don't understand what I mean, is whenever whenever the Orthodox describe iconographers, there are some that like to say that, oh, we don't paint icons, we write icons. And the rationale for that is that, one, painting assumes that you're doing something superficial, and iconography has more depth and meaning than just merely making a painting. And the other is that you're also conveying theology in your icons. So it's just like a theologian writes with a pen, an iconographer writes with egg tempera on wood. And I don't like that. It comes off as snobbish, is what it is. And it also denies what you're actually doing. You are actually painting. And furthermore, it says that you should be shameful if you are just doing painting. In fact, if anything, I think that what iconography does is it transfigures painting. It actually redeems and sanctifies painting, just like how Christ redeems and sanctifies us to be who we are, and not to be defined by our sin. Elevates us, transfigures us. I feel that what iconography does, it transfigures painting. So you paint icons. You don't write icons. It's just, and also the original Greek was, well, it's graph, and graph means writing. Well, but also Greek is very dense. It's a very dense language. It doesn't just mean writing. It also refers to painting. And in fact, I've learned this. In the Septuagint version of the Old Testament, in Genesis, the verb that's used for create is close to it's actually very similar to the verb that's used to describe painting. And in fact, I forget exactly the book that's used. It's Callisto Ware's little guide about like how the Orthodox view salvation. Sorry, not that. I forget the title, but it's like a general thing about art in the Orthodox tradition or something, or icons, the meaning of icons. But maybe in the comments or something, I'll look up the title. But at any rate, but in the introduction, it points out that the Orthodox Church is the only, certainly amongst the Christian denominations, and I believe in religions in general, that talks about art as a divine thing, as a divine attribute, that the act of creating is a divine quality. And it makes sense if you believe that we are created in the image and likeness of God, and one of God's attributes is creator. He's created us to be little creators in our own right. So there is a and this is why I feel that the intersection between art and the spiritual is very important. Most people like to separate that, and I think that's the gravest thing, that's the gravest injustice you can do to art itself. By separating the two, you basically make art into a freelance entity, which then is looking for a master, and then what happens is that art serves other masters, and then I think it degrades and deforms it. And I think we've seen this in the West. By divorcing that spiritual element of art, you then get art that's very surface, and it's very plain to see. You see that in the music, you see that in the paintings, you see that, and you even see that in the films. you don't get that sense of art that moves. I mean, like music was considered the handmaiden of theology. I know Luther has said it. I want to say Aquinas has said it also, but there is that sense that art and the spiritual were very, very important. And this is why, but going a little bit back to the Orthodox side of things, why iconoclasm is very important. It's like, why would you get into intense theological discussions that even include political violence over something like icons? Well, apart from things like it's part of the tradition and it testifies the faith, including not just that Christ is divine but also Christ is human, but it also in a general way in relation to art, it says that art is a beautiful, holy thing. By saying that art isn't, by saying that paintings or anything with art is just idolatry or just this materialistic evil thing, you're basically saying that art is not worthy. And then you basically alienated art from something that gives it its true beauty, its fullness. And now art is left to wander sort of aimlessly and then is subsumed under another master, and I think debases it even more. So now going back to Andrei Rublev, this is a film that you can see why this film gets me very excited, and why I consider this a favorite film. It's because it does address those issues. And I like to think that it does provide an answer, but it's probably one of those films where my take on it will be different than your take. But at the very least, it is addressing that subject, and that's what makes it very, very interesting to me, and why it's very worthwhile. Now we get into the complicated history of it. The Criterion edition, as you saw earlier, this is old school release, which means this is letterbox. It's not anamorphic. It's not an anamorphically enhanced for widescreen television, so you do see that frame. It's not the best transfer. I mean, it's probably the best you're going to get. Okay, this is where you get into the history of the different versions. What is on the Criterion edition lasts for 205 minutes. That's 3 hours and 25 minutes. So, there are some 3-hour films that justifies the length. This one, I feel it does also, but it may try your patience. Especially as I was talking about earlier, that the narrative is not entirely tight. It's more slice of life, slice of history affair. I don't think it's ever boring in any way, but if you're expecting a straightforward narrative where point A leads to point B and then everything all ties together, you may be disappointed with it. But I do feel that every scene and every moment has a purpose, and especially relating to its larger theme about art and art and faith and art and life and so on. And again, I can really, really go on and on about all the different things you can get from it, but I think what I provided thus far will give you a good little basis for it. Maybe it's one of those things where I maybe need to do another episode where I talk more about Andrei Rublev and what I get out of it. But anyways, back to the versions thing. Okay, what the Criterion edition is 205 minutes, and it's advertised as the director's cut, which I think is slightly misleading. And this is where you get into the complicated history of it. It was a miracle that first off, it was a miracle that the film was made at all, given its subject matter and given where it was made and when it was made. The only reason why it was ever really approved is because it was written and initially conceived during that brief period in in the Soviet Union's history where there was a cultural thaw, where Khrushchev, in trying to brush aside Stalin and says like, no, we're not really bad people. There was a cultural thaw, and this is where a lot of artists started to become in prominence, and including Andrei Tarkovsky. And this project was approved during that cultural thaw period. But then by the time it was finished, that's when the thaw turned back into something frozen solid. And there were a lot of objections on the censors. So there was a initial sort of rough cut of 205 minutes. And he showed it to his friends first. And then his friends made some suggestions of doing some further cutting. And initially he objected to it, but then he looked at it more seriously, and I think he actually tried it, and he found that it did work better, that nothing that he felt was important was sacrificed in the process, and it actually made a lot of the scenes better. So, and this is where I'm not sure this is where it gets a little hazy. I think he trimmed it down to 190 minutes. So basically he cut off about 15 minutes of material. And I think he was asked to cut down 4 more minutes, and he got it down to 186 minutes. And eventually, in spite of the fact that the demands came, and I believe this came from Mosfilm directly, but in spite of the demands, he would eventually endorse that version. So what I like to call what's on the Criterion edition is, I've thought of it as the work print edit or the initial director's cut. And then the slightly shorter, the 186 minutes, the one that he did publicly endorse more than the initial version, I would call that the refined director's cut. And so then it gets even more complicated. Mosfilm still wasn't satisfied with either version. Certainly they weren't going to put out 205, but they weren't even interested in the 186. And then it got cut. It was asked to cut down even more, and it then got cut down to. Well, first off, it was going to premiere. It was going to premiere at Cannes, and in '67 they decided to pull it at the last minute, they said that the film wasn't completed. So they couldn't play it in the '67. '68, the Cannes Festival didn't even happen because of the May '68 protests. And so finally, '69, the organizers wanted it to play, and the Soviets said, "Okay, we'll let this play, but it can't play in competition." So it wasn't in competition with the Palme d'Or. So there you have it. And let's see. There were other shorter versions that were shown in different. There was one made for Soviet television that was reduced to like 101 minutes. There's an international cut that I think was in the 2-hour range. But anyway, so the point of all this is that there's various versions. Now, this has not been reissued on DVD as of this day, as of January 23rd, 2013. This has not been reissued as either DVD or Blu-ray. My personal suggestion, is that instead of using, because I think the work print edit or the initial director's cut is only sourced from one print. I think there's only one print available. As far as we know, they could have found something, but since that version is very, very limited, I don't think that should be the main version. I think that there should be a Criterion edition. There should be two versions: the refined director's cut as the main feature, because there's many more prints of that cut than there are of the refined cut, rather refined director's cut compared to the initial director's cut, and that that should be the main feature, and then the initial director's cut can be a second disc, can be its own feature, and maybe improve the transfer as best you can, but understand that that's like a second feature, and don't have that as the main feature. But that is my humble suggestion. And then have another disc with more supplements and features and so forth. And yes, I would love to talk about it. So maybe this is my little slightly sycophantic, narcissistic pitch to, hey, maybe I should be involved in this, if possible. But if not, that's cool too. But you'll definitely see me first in line to get it, no matter how it's made. But anyway, that's my suggestion. Other little things. I mean, yeah, this is definitely a film I can talk on and on. But I'll conclude with this thought. The thing I liked about the work print edit, or the initial director's cut, is that the working title for Andrei Rublev was Staci po Andrei, which translates as The Passion According to Andrei. And I like that title more than Andrei Rublev because it really does illustrate a lot of themes about it. And what I take from it is a threefold meaning in that title. There's the passion as in Christ's passion as viewed by Andrei Rublev, because there is an episode devoted to that. And you kind of get the sense that this is kind of how Rublev sees that particular moment in time, and this is and also you get the sense that this is what drives him artistically and spiritually. The second meaning is that this whole thing is Andrei's passion. This is the cross that he is taking up himself as a man of God, as one who's taken. Who's joined a monastic. There's not orders in the Catholic sense, but joining the monastic life by taking on that and by being an iconographer, this is his cross to bear, and this is his struggle. This is his way that he has to go. So what you're seeing is his struggle. And what made him, eventually what made him recognized as a saint in his own right. He is canonized by the Orthodox Church, and he is recognized as a saint, and a very important iconographer. And then the third meaning I get from the Passion According to Andrei, or Staci po Andrei, is that this can be seen as the Passion According to Andrei Tarkovsky. And this is where a lot of his major themes and occupations and interests, that's when they start to emerge. Now, a little caveat. As far as with me and Andrei Tarkovsky, I've only seen Ivan's Childhood, Andrei Rublev, Solaris, and The Mirror. I've not seen Stalker, I have not seen Nostalgia, and I've not seen The Sacrifice. And I know plenty of Tarkovsky fans and cinephiles that love his later works more. They feel that it's refinement, and I do not deny that at all. I really don't, and I do want to see those films, but I do feel that there is something to be said. Given what I know about Tarkovsky and given what I've seen, I still find it great to see those things established early on. It may not come off as nuanced, and I think that's one I guess criticism that you could make on this, is that it's a little bit maybe too, well, it's not really heavy-handed, but it certainly presents its ideas in a very clear way. It does hammer its points. But I think even then, I do see it as more of a manifesto of sorts, or a declaration of what true art should be, and why do we even bother to make art. I think that and sometimes you do need that clear, unambiguity about it. You just have to be able to state it right then and there and not try to be subtle about it. It's not to say that there isn't subtleties. There's a different kind of subtlety. But anyways, so again, I see this as the Passion according to Andrei Tarkovsky as well, and this is partly why he got into a lot of problems with the Soviets on this particular film, is because it was interpreted, and I could see that as being interpreted, that there were parallels, like say the Tatar invasions and what was going on in the Soviet Union, and there are other little things that were interpreted as going against the proletariat government, and so for Tarkovsky himself had a long view of history. He had an understanding and appreciation of history, and one of the things by having a long view of history, you understand that things repeat themselves. Things never really go away. There's nothing new under the sun. And what happened in the 15th century happens again in the 20th century, and it's going to continue. As long as we're around, because we end up doing the same damn thing to each other, and in a way it's a shame. But what I feel that this is why I feel art is really, really important, is that by showing what we are capable of doing and being honest with ourselves, there's a small chance that somebody's going to see it and someone's going to get it finally and say, you know what, I really don't like this. I don't like what we can do to each other. I don't like that we are this cruel or that we are this merciless. Maybe we need to do something different. Maybe we need to get beyond any kind of animalistic impulses and actually be better human beings. Let's actually be virtuous. And that, I feel, is art at its best, is if it can do that, if it can show a viewer what you are capable of doing and forces you to, for lack of a better word, or certainly provokes you to think in a different way, and to really examine yourself and say, maybe I should do things differently. Maybe I shouldn't resort to the same old. And that's what I feel that he was trying to do here, or trying to show. And in this case, he's trying to show what artists go through, and it's asserting what matters in art and why it's so important, even in a world where it seems like they don't really care. And there's other little moments like that. I mean, there's in one of the accounts, the craftsmen, they're talking about working with the Grand Prince. There's this rivalry between the Grand Prince and his brother, and it's all about making palaces and houses and so forth. And the craftsmen were talking about saving the best for, I forget if it was saving the best for the Grand Prince or for his brother, or one of the two, and then the other gets jealous and then ends up killing them off. But that says that that shouldn't be, if you think that's the best, appeasing to a particular ruler, then you may not end up being on the right side, or you may think you're on the right side, but it ends up costing you a lot more than just your art. And so I think it's those kind. This is why I feel that everything in the film itself works, even if it may seemingly not work on a narrative term, is that it all goes back to the theme. It all goes back to that idea about what is art, what is an artist, what is an artist's true ambition, what should be an artist's true ambition. Is it just for entertainment? Is it just for appeasing someone who has access to a lot of weapons and can possibly and will kill you if you disobey him? Or is it doing this for God? And that's this is why it's one of my favorite films. This is why I've gone on. This is why it's the long one. I told you this was going to be long. If you're still watching this, good for you, for sticking along with me. But it's something that I know for myself. I care about this. I care about art, and I care about what it means and how it affects and moves people. And this film states that. And again, like I said before, there are plenty of other films that are my favorites, but this is why it's one of my favorites. It touches on some themes and ideas that are very, very dear to me. And I know for some of my friends, those things are important to them as well. Maybe not to the same degree as me, but they're certainly important. And I'm sure there's others I don't know for whom this is important. And to that, that's to whom I recommend. It's if you have ever asked yourself, what is art and what's the meaning of art? What's true art? I would definitely recommend this film, hands down. But I also understand this is not a film for everybody. So if the length if the idea of the length gets to you, or that if it's a loose narrative, it's more episodic, it's more philosophical, it's more thematic, I can understand you not gravitating to this anyway. But I will say that at least give this a shot. At least, because you may end up liking it. But I wanted to give it some warnings so that I don't want you to go into it with very high expectations. But if you're prepared for that and you want to give it a shot, I would say take it. And again, it's a film that dares to ask very important questions. And the fact that there really hasn't been a film since Andrei Rublev that deals with it, I think it makes it even more important. So I would say definitely check it out. Criterion, I know I have no doubts that you're working very hard on making a really nice Blu-ray edition and subsequently a DVD reissue. So I say that keep it up. Hopefully it will come sooner rather than later. I will definitely be in line to upgrade this. It's not to say that this isn't bad. I love this film. I just want to see it presented in the best possible way. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. Like I said, my suggestion is that you release 2 versions of it, or have it be a 2-version release. One is the refined director's cut, 186 minutes, and then the other is the work print edit, or the initial director's cut, the 205 minute, and then put as many supplements as you can. And if I can have a hand in it, that'd be great. If not, that's cool too. But I'll definitely be in line to get it when it comes out. So yeah. Whew. That was a lot. Like I said before, it's 3 hours, so of course this justifies this length as well. So anyways, that's Andrei Rublev. And until next time, take care.